Okay, I welcome you all to the second session for today. This second session is also very important. As we all gear up for closing the books of accounts of our clients, we need to see a lot of things from GST perspective while closing the books of accounts. So to guide us on the same, we have with us CA Jayesh Thakkar. He is the just immediate past convener, doesn't really need introduction to this August gathering, but as a mark of respect, I would say, I would like to invite CA Rishabh Chaudhary to introduce our today's faculty.
Good morning once again. Thank you, Purvi, for the opportunity. The second faculty for the day needs no introduction. He's our favorite past convener, Jayesh Thakkar. He's a chartered accountant and he's graduated from Soumya College. He has he's cleared his DISA, a certificate course on indirect tax, and also completed forensic audit. He has overall experience of more than 15 years, and he has significant experience in advising service sector clients across the industries, including indirect tax implications and giving opinion on cross-border transactions, handling departmental audits, assessments, investigations, and litigations. He has also contributed his views and commentary on indirect tax proposals in Budget Book on Finance Bill 2022, released by the JB Nagar Study Circle. And he has also been a speaker and group leader in activities at various circles and branches of WIRC of ICA. Now, may I please request Seema ma'am and CA Bhavesh Shah to present him with the memento.
Full screen का? ये ठीक है ना? बोलना चाहिए ना, ये चलेगा। इनके ऊपर हम Good morning, friends. Thank you all, one and all, and especially the convener and all my seniors and friends for giving me this opportunity to discuss on the topic GST. On a lighter note, before I start my sessions, I forgot one question to my first speaker. Whether your tool, whether it supports the GST compliance or not. I don't know whether Gaurav is there or not.
He has already told it is too complicated.
Yeah. So this was on a lighter note, but we know that we are now already on almost a 6th or 7th year of the implementation of GST. But the law is yet not settled. The way the government is coming up with all the changes and amendments frequently rather, it is very difficult for all of us to cope up with all of the changes. But then too, since we are on the verge of the closure of the books of accounts, I thought this should be the topic which we should consider for our members Second thing, I also being a student of GST and I'm also the learner like you. So I would request to let's keep these sessions very interactive, right? Because most of the things we'll find all are the common points, but if we'll keep these sessions very interactive, we all will be able to learn something new out of this session. So with this agenda, let's start this session. So now since we are discussing the closure of the books of account from the GST perspective, the questions what arise in our mind. So then what is the importance and the relevance of 31st March, right? So 31st March, it is an event where we closes our books of accounts. As on that day, the book should get audited by the auditor. They passes the closing entries and the adjustment entries. So whether it is for the, maybe it is for the company or for the practitioner or maybe for the auditor or consultant, it is whether it is imperative to look upon the GST law before we closes the books of account. So this is the question from my side. I would like to ask you whether, because see, every time whenever we do the closure of the books of account, we think about the accounting standards, we think about the all the closing entries of the all the salaries and all the outstanding expenses, prepaid expenses, kind of thing. So is it required to look upon the GST law before we closes our books of account? Right? So it is very much imperative rather, because the way the government is asking the information here and there, maybe in the RTR form or maybe in your tax audit report, before we reconcile all those figures, I think it is advisable we should not close our books of account without considering all those things. So I would like to touch upon some of the parts during my session. So hope I think if anything is, if I miss, you also can support in that discussion. Now, other important consideration for this topic. See, levy, since it's not settled, but irrespective of it, we'll have to close our books of accounts, right? Second thing, when we discuss or when we talk about the closure of the books of accounts, normally what we do, right? This is also a question from my side. When we say we are closing our books of accounts, normally as per me, we are just closing all the monetary transactions, the transactions what the company has occurred in the monetary terms. But there are certain events, there are certain things which may not be in the monetary terms, but it may also require certain kind of disclosure in the books of accounts. It may also affect the GST point of view. So those things also we should consider before we closes our books of account. There are certain things at the beginning of the new financial year, certain compliances are required under GST, like opt-in and opt-out from the mode of return filing, what we opt for, QRMPN kind of thing, normal to composition and composition to normal kind of thing, application for the LUT, right? So it is must. So certain kind of compliances are also required at the beginning of the new financial year. And apart from this, if anything or any mistakes, if it is there in a kind of reporting of the transaction, maybe in the returns or maybe in there are error in the accounting, if we consider at the stage of the closure of the books of accounts, it will help us to avoid the spillover of the effect. Otherwise, what I understood from the GST is nothing but the reconciliation. I hope you all will agree with me. GST is always, it is a kind of a reconciliation. I don't know whether we are practicing on GST or whether we are just doing the reconciliation at every steps of our life when we are into the GST especially. So GST, it is a kind of a major kind of it as a reconciliation. If we are not considering all those things while closing of the books of account, it will give the spillover effect in the next financial year also. And it will disturb our next year's books of accounts also. So with this background, I thought this is the important topic, and let's move towards our next slide. So what we are going to learn today, I thought we should touch upon some of the aspects of the input tax credit, some of the aspects of the revenue, unreported revenues and advances. We'll touch upon the fixed asset, some of the important provisions. We'll discuss some of the little bit reverse charge compliances. Importantly, the related party transactions. I hope this would be the good discussion today in our today's sessions. Then the reconciliation as we discussed, and the documents. Documents are the part basically when we are doing the compliance on the system front, we normally ignore the documents part. But under GST, as I'm just taking up the assignments of the audits and all, see, documents plays the major role. In your system, you might have accounted for any of the levy, maybe CGST, SGST, or IGST. But unless or until you refer or you go through the basis of those transactions like documents, is something new emerges, right? So we should not ignore the documents part when we are into the GST. So this would be the areas which we'll touch upon during these sessions. Okay, let's start with the input tax credit. Why we have taken, or why I'm touching upon this input tax credit part first, because see, we can control what is it. See, whatever it is in from the my side, I can control those kind of transactions. But when the some things where I'm depend on someone else, it is very much difficult for all of us to rectify those kinds of error if it is not been touched upon, if it is not been considered well within the time. So I thought let's discuss the input tax credit part first. Okay. Regarding the input tax credit, tell me one thing. Just looked up by just looking at the transaction side or just looking at the entries, should we blindly allow the ITC while filing the returns, or we should just look upon the certain conditions which are been prescribed under section 16 before we allow the credit? See, initially when the levy was introduced, the conditions were very few, but over the period of years, they just gone adding more and more conditions to those in this section 16. But right now, if I see, there are almost 8 to 9 conditions are been attached. So let's discuss one by one, and we'll just see whether all those conditions while closing of the books of accounts, whether all those conditions for all those of transactions which are going to close as on the year end, whether all these conditions are getting satisfied or not. First things, possession of the valid duty paid documents. See, imperatively, we'll say, okay, since the accounts are been, transactions are been accounted for, then it should impliedly we can say that the transactions, since it has been accounted for, that it is accounted for on the basis of all those documents, then the document should be there with the company. But see, in the some of the cases, tell me one thing, whether it is a valid duty paid documents or not, is it possible us to recognize or to identify it before we closes of the books of accounts? Right? See, basically nowadays we are moving towards the e-invoicing. Right? So whether the company who has taken the input tax credit, whether it is on the basis of just a normal tax invoice, or whether it is on the basis of the e-invoicing, whether all the supportings are there or not. So those things would play a major role. Second thing, the details are furnished in the return. Whether the supplier's due diligence, whether it has been done while entering into transaction with all those supplier, it is also very much relevant, because those people, if they are not filing their returns, then definitely ITC will not be allowed. Yeah, so nowadays the companies are, because see, once the government comes up with the kind of penalty and interest kind of thing, it helps the taxpayer. See, rather just if we want to avoid those kind of heavy penalties and interest, now for everyone it is very much imperative you should do the due diligence of your supplier. Many taxpayer now what they have started. First, the due diligence, and second, before they releases the payment to their supplier, they just ensure whether he is compliant guy or not. If your supplier, if it is not a compliant guy, better you do not enter into the transaction with those supplier. Or second thing, if you already entered, then please don't pay the GST at least to them. So many of taxpayers now they started this kind of practices so that whatever tax, if they are not paying to the government straight away, we can reverse it off in our books of account and we can just relax. So second, third thing, actual receiving of the goods and services or both. At the end of the year, as on the closure of the year end, it is very much important to see whether whatever transaction it has been accounted in the books of accounts on the basis of which the ITC it has been claimed, whether the actually goods and services are been received or not. Basically, when we discuss about the year-end transaction, many times it is possible the stock might be in transit, especially on 31st March, right? See, basically, it is not possible for the accountant to verify whether the ITC, whatever they are accounting it for in the system, whether it is eligible credit or not eligible credit. But if we verify if we correlate the accounting figures or accounting transaction with their related inventory report and kind of thing, right? GRN kind of thing. So we'll be able to verify whether the ITC it has been claimed as on that year end, it is validly claimed or not. Let's say the one of the consignment was in transit as on 31st March, right? But since the invoices and everything were in place, those transactions goes accounted for, but the inventory was in transit. So we allowed as on 31st March. It should be claimed in the next month when actually they receive the goods and services or both. Third thing, ITC has not been restricted. Knowingly, unknowingly, many times yes. So there will okay. So Madam Sima Madam, she is saying that if it is already reflecting in your GSTR 2B and they are already reported in their GST returns, then what is the issue? See, basically, whatever conditions they have stipulated in the provision, it is a must, right? And second thing, then the mismatch will arise, right? In my books of account, I am claiming in the next month, whereas they are reporting in the month of March. But see, ultimately, it's a matter of reconciliation. So that's why they are allowing you the changes. See, that's why they are allowing you the change. You can modify that system generated 3B figure. But see, we should be very much cautious, right? See, GST, one more thing I would like to add upon. When the GST was introduced, normally, most of the time we consider it is a kind of a in general levy. GST, it is not a general levy, sir. GST, it is a transaction-based tax. You all will agree with me. It is not only on the kind of sale or it is not only on the kind of purchase, right? Sometimes it will be on both. I'll give one of the example in our further slides. It is a transaction-based tax. So many times when such kind of reconciliation arises, it should be document for. In future, so if any of the departmental notices they issues, and if you are not ready with the reconciliation, then it will create a great problem, right? Because doing the post-mortem of the transaction, it is very much difficult, right? So definitely you should not claim the credit in the month of March, rather than you should claim in the month of April by having some sort of reconciliation with the backing of those figures. And anyhow, since your 2B is going to be reported at a higher side in the month of March, but in the month of April, you can just give the explanation by saying that the goods were not received in the month of March. That's why we are claimed in the month of April. Yeah, definitely. You should not take in your, even you should not account it for in your books of account of that ITC since it is in on transit. Yeah, receivable. You can park one other ledger and you can just park in that particular ledger. Yes.
company and now only by the child or the etc. So as far as GST is concerned, what they are doing, they are following the practice that whatever ITC is there, they are claiming as input tax credit in the books, but they are not showing it two-way. Claiming it two-way at all. And at the time, telling or requesting the auditor that kitna isme se input credit milega, we will do this next year, August or September, whenever. Is it allowed or what? How exactly it is?
No, sir. Input tax credit, it has nothing to do with your GSTR 2A. Input tax credit, your supplier going to report in your GSTR 2 and 2B.
It is reported.
Right.
Billing at a time.
See,
Because they are very cautious.
basically, it is a loss to you then. Right? If you have the GST and liability and you are not availing the ITC on time and you are just paying it through your cash ledger, it doesn't make any sense. Right? If it is validly claimed, it is reflecting in your GST 2A, definitely you should claim it is on time. But then also legally, if you ask, since they are claiming the time, they're claiming the ITC well within that allowable time limit of that September and November, it is allowable. But then I don't think it is a advisable practice. Unless, yes, but then sir, kya hoga? The month in which they are going to avail the credit, it may be possible in that month, there may not be the liability. They don't have the liability in that particular month. So it will just pile up. सर नॉन कंप्लायंट तो जो मंथ में आप लोगे उस मंथ में भी नॉन कंप्लायंट हो सकता है.
Now they are very cautious.
So we should not wait for over the years. It may take at least a month's time or 2 months time to verify and kind of thing, to certify and kind of thing. But definitely they should avail immediately.
Good practice. Legally, they are not.
Legally, if they are claiming well within that time, allowable time limit, then there is no issue.
Thank you.
So, sir, if you are availing the ITC and if you are not utilizing, so it is a best practice. I would say it is a best practice. Because जैन साहब, ITC अवेल करने में कोई पाप नहीं है, यूटिलाइजेशन में पाप है. यूटिलाइज मत करो. Confidence. Sir, one more thing I would like to advise. One more thing on this part. Sir, GST में concept है claiming of ITC and reclaiming of ITC. I don't know how many of you are aware of this particular compliance. See, GST में if you are availing any of the ITC, or rather if you entered into any of the transaction but you are not sure whether this transaction it is in the eligible category or ineligible category. So I would advise पहले उसको avail कर लो in the same month. No. Avail कर लो, and if you are not sure, तो in the same month you reverse also. फिर क्या होगा सर? फिर आपका वो जो टाइम बेरिंग का मैटर है ना, वो निकल जाता है. Then till lifelong, whenever that transaction goes confirm and a kind of thing, anytime you can claim that ITC. There is no limit then after that of November and September, it will all will go on there. आप पहले claim कर लो, उसको reverse कर दो if you are not sure. Whenever you are now, then after whenever your transactions get settled and a kind of confirm and a kind of thing, you can reclaim that ITC. Then there is no time limit. No. Reversal can be at any point of, see, just to avoid that interest element. Just to avoid that interest element, I am saying you reverse in that same month itself. No, it will not be available. If you already availed and you reverse, for reclaiming the ITC, there is no deadline. नहीं, that तो it is additional condition, sir. I have not yet completed all my conditions. अगर वो बंदा टैक्स नहीं भरता है, रिटर्न फाइल नहीं करता है, तो नहीं मिलेगा. Recently in this year only rule 37A was added. पहले क्या था कि हम हमारे रिटर्न देखते थे, अभी हमें उनका रिटर्न्स भी देखना है. So rule 37A, it is added. If he is not filing the return, if he is not paying the tax, your ITC will be disallowed. But then sir, after November क्या होगा? See, November तक I can just insist के भाई file कर दो, report कर दो. That thing I can just do the follow. And that follow up is also possible if I can identify those kind of transaction well within the time. यहाँ पर तो ट्रांजेक्शन आइडेंटिफाई करने में टाइम निकल जाता है एंड हर एक वेंडर से और सप्लायर से फॉलो अप करके ये करवाना इट इज अ चैलेंज. सो दैट्स व्हाट आई एम सेइंग, अगर ऐसे कोई सप्लायर्स है तो अवेल कर लो, रिवर्स कर दो एंड देन यू कैन रिक्लेम एट एनी पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम. अगर नवंबर तक अगर वो रिपोर्टिंग कर देता है तो यू कैन रिक्लेम.
Maybe ITC is not right. So, client, do this yearly work on the, whatever, like, then whether this is good or monthly reverse.
सर देखो, अभी रिसेंटली गवर्नमेंट भी सी दे आर आल्सो लर्निंग फ्रॉम अस. वो कोई ऐसे को मतलब रॉकेट, देयर इज नो रॉकेट साइंस. पहले हम क्या करते थे, अगर छोट अभी जैसे सर ने क्वेरी रेज किया, थोड़ा सा भी डाउट है तो आईटीसी लेना नहीं है, राइट? ये थंब रूल था. ब्लॉक क्रेडिट है, क्लेम नहीं करना है. मोटर कार परचेज किया है, आईटीसी लेना ही नहीं है, कैपिटलाइज कर दो, रिटर्न में दिखाओ ही मत, राइट? दिस काइंड ऑफ प्रैक्टिसेस वर ऑल वर फॉलोइंग. Now the government recently, the board has given the guidelines kind of thing. If you have entered into any kind of transactions, ITC आपको लेना है. Whatever transactions, if it is there in your books of accounts, it is not like if you're not availing the transactions तो वो नहीं. But then government says वो जो that table number 6 and kind of thing वहाँ पर match वहाँ पर reconciliation में issue होता है. So government says the practice what we should follow. You always in any scenario you first avail the ITC, and if it is ineligible kind of thing, block credit and kind of thing, आप reverse कर दो. तो avail करना भी जरूरी है, reverse करना भी जरूरी है. So it is not like कि मैं लूंगा ही नहीं, right? Reverse करना है, yes. Others में reverse करना है. Others में reverse करना है because 3B में we don't have much more options. But when we file our annual return, that entire table 7 it is given. Rule number 42, 30, and many options are given. So in the, while filing the GST 9, we should report in that particular table. See, if you utilized, right, and throughout the period, if the balance, if it was not sufficient balance in your electronic credit ledger, then yes, interest will be applicable.
GST. So should he claim and then reverse or what?
He should claim and reverse. Yes.
And there are milestones. Now the supplier will be charging GST. See, because now services are not received by the recipient. What do you do?
So regarding services, GST it is on the either on the advances or on the completion of service, whichever is earlier, right? If it is only the matter of advances, the GST what we are paying, it is only on the advance.
It is not advance.
Then
It is in the contract, so there are milestones there.
then
So
if the
suppose-
milestone, if it sorry, yeah, you first complete and then I.
So, suppose 20% is advance payment. Then, on, say, 10% monthly payments, whatever. If it is a long contract, that way.
So what
Suppose
is
it is engineering contract.
okay? So then what is the milestone?
Yes, so first milestone will be advance. I mean, once you sign the contract, accept the contract, 20% is.
Right. So this is 20% is nothing but the advance. So at this point of time, there is no completion of services. So you cannot claim the credit because you don't have the valid duty paid documents because they are not going to issue you the tax invoice. Right?
So they will issue the tax. The supplier will issue the tax invoice,
And it is not that,
So then I would advise, okay, since if the tax invoice, if it is already been issued, you better you claim the ITC, right? And if you are saying provision of service, if it is yet not complete, it is going to complete maybe in a future date, तो आप उसको पार्क करके रख दो, don't utilize that credit. जैसे आपका milestone खत्म होता है, because see, receiving of goods and service, it is also one of the condition to claim the ITC. खाली tax invoice issue कर देने से you cannot claim the credit. You will have to prove the services were actually been provided. तो आप ITC since the tax invoice they already issued, तो आपके लिए तो credit लेना है, because otherwise वो lapse हो जाएगा.
but it is a continuous process. I mean, suppose the contract is for 1 year, then it will be, I mean, they will be issuing of document, they will be doing engineering. It's not like one time
Sir,
that you will be receiving. all the
continuous
services.
supply of services में, if the milestone, if it has been defined in your contract, then those date will be considered as in a timeline or the provision of service. If the one of that certain portion of that services would complete as on the date when the milestone it is defined in your books of account. Services may take little bit more time. Okay. मटेरियल के सामने एडवांसेस पे there is no GST. There is no GST, so there is no question of claiming the ITC. Sir, in your question, whenever your milestone, you achieving the milestone, basis on that you should claim the credit. Tax invoice sir क्या है पता है? Nowadays GST में there are many more concepts. We'll discuss in our next slide. Advances है, तो advances में you are not supposed to issue the tax invoice. आपको रिसिट वाउचर इशू करना है. रिसिट वाउचर पे आपको जीएसटी कलेक्ट करना है. ऑन द एडवांसेस यू आर सपोज्ड टू पे द जीएसटी, एंड व्हेनेवर योर सर्विसेज गेट्स कंप्लीटेड, एट दैट पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम यू आर सपोज्ड टू रेज द टैक्स इनवॉइस. So accordingly, basis on your milestone, whenever you're completing your services, at that point of time you should claim the credit. Okay. The tax actually should have been paid to the government, return should have been filed, consideration paid within 180 days. Sir, ये headache है, right? It is very much difficult to verify, because ये क्या होता है, एक होता है इवेंट जो कंटिन्यूस इवेंट है, और एक पर्टिकुलर इवेंट होता है जो एक कट ऑफ डेट को कंप्लीट हो जाता है, राइट? दिस इज द कंटिन्यूस काइंड ऑफ थिंग. एवरी मंथ you are supposed to trace the supplier or the transactions whose payments are getting overdue beyond 180 days. जैसे 180 days cross होता है for any of the transaction, voluntarily you should reverse that ITC along with the interest. So retention में my personal view is that retention, it is a kind of the subsequent event. See, it is a kind of a deposit rather, right? You are not keeping their outstanding against that payable, right? You will show it as a retention deposit rather, showing it as an outstanding towards the supplier. So
that will be paid only after defect liability period is over.
So what we are advising to our client, okay, you claim the ITC, you reverse, and you reclaim whenever you pay to your this thing, retention money. So it should not get lapse in future. Because retention, it is a very debatable issue. I am saying it is a deposit. Someone say irrespective whether it is deposit or payable to the supplier, it is nothing but the outstanding amount. Right? So there are views are possible. So what we are advising to our client, okay, better you claim the ITC. If any of the element of your outstanding amount, if you are not paying or if you are going to pay in a future date, retention and a kind of thing, you claim the ITC. To that extent, you reverse the ITC, and whenever you pay it off, you can reclaim, because for reclaiming the ITC, there is no time limit. Already received, but we are keeping as a deposit, security. Yes. Yes. It is a different type of transactions because जैसे आप payment कर देते हो, but while releasing the payment, certain element you are keeping as a deposit. Definitely it will mention in every cases it will mention in your contractual documents. But क्या होता है, the views are like that. Okay, to that extent you are not paying to your supplier within that 180 days का time limit. So anyhow it is outstanding amount. Anyhow it is outstanding amount. So that's why to that extent at least you reverse that ITC and the reclaim whenever you repay to their retention. Sometimes they give guarantee only. But it is a
That full payment will give you priority. Full payment, I want to.
okay. Not entitled for claiming the ITC beyond the 30th November of the next financial year. यहाँ पर एक क्ल्यू है, पहले ये डेट 30th September था, ड्यू डेट ऑफ फाइलिंग ऑफ द रिटर्न फॉर द मंथ ऑफ 30th September of the next financial year. Recently they have amended by saying that you cannot claim the ITC beyond the 30th November of the next financial year. Now what we should consider, whether we should consider the return for the month of October, which we are supposed to file in the by 20th of the November, or what should be the date and why 30th November? See, technically speaking, there is no logic keeping 30th November as a date for claiming the ITC, right? Logically, it should have been 31st December, filing of the annual return. By that time, we should reconcile our transaction. We should, if anything, if it is left, we can just consider in that month itself, in the month of November and maybe in the month of December and a kind of thing. There is no logic in keeping November as a date. But sir, one thing, November, it is a particular date. They are not talking about any of the month for which we are filing the return. For example, for the month of, let's say, the return for the month of August, if you are filing in the month of October, so you can claim October ka return if you are filing in the month of December, then so that's why what they are saying, before 30th November, whatever returns if you are filing in that return, you should claim the remaining ITC, whatever if it is left. Okay, so with all these conditions, there are some restrictions and on the eligibility of the ITC section 16 already we have already discussed. Section 17(5) we have already touched upon, but we'll consider on our next slide. See, some of the ITC it is not allowable. When the GST was introduced, the core principle of bringing the GST was the seamless flow of the credit of the ITC, right? But I don't know whether that purpose it is, whether it is defeated or what, right? Actually speaking, not allowing the ITC on some of the items, it is not advisable because see, till the time if you are saying I'm into the furtherance of business, so whatever expense I'm incurring, whatever supplies I'm procuring, it is for my business only, right? Then there should not be second thought. But government always, since the previous regime, service tax and VAT kind of thing, since then they are into the such kind of thinking. Okay, certain elements of ITC it should not be allowed. They have given the example of motor vehicle. They given the about the food related expenses, healthcare related expenses, cosmetics and plastic surgery and kind of things. Composite में तो definitely since they are not into the normal taxpayer, so it should not be allowed because they are not issuing the tax invoice. And personal consumption. Sir, ये एक चीज पे बाकी तो I think you must be knowing के what are the ineligible category and what are the eligible. I will not go into the detail on each and every line item. But sir, what is personal consumption? Can anyone quantify the personal consumption of the goods and services? When I'm into the business and I'm incurring all those expenses for my business, how to quantify the things? Well, so that I can say it is on a personal consumption. It was for the personal consumption. Estimation. Okay. 80-20. So definitely certain things we cannot quantify. Jain sab ne bola estimates. So there also, if you refer rule number 42 and a kind of thing, They are saying 5% of your common ITC, it will be considered as a personal credit for the personal consumption. I don't know any of us whether we are reversing to that to the extent of that 5% of your common credits or not. But definitely, wherever if you are coming across all kind of ITC, wherever we having an impression that this ITC may fall under the personal consumption kind of thing, better we should not claim, because the claiming of ITC it is very easy. आपको खाली figure punch करना है return में. But when it comes to the reversal and kind of thing, that too with the heavy interest and penalty, it will cost us. Rather than better, whatever is the amount, better you reverse it off. So personal consumption, food and also they already determined. They're already saying food related items, all the beauty treatment, all the related, those things they already given. It's already under 17.5. But apart from this 17.5, some of the items may be falling under the common ITC. You cannot determine whether it is for the business or whether maybe it is for, like say stationery, right? Telephone bill, right? So we cannot identify whether it was for my personal purpose or maybe how many calls I'm doing for my personal and how many calls I'm doing for my business purpose. So they are saying if any of the common ITC, if it is there in your books of account, I think they are saying 5% of the total ITC will be considered as in for the personal consumption. So it should be reversed. No, it is that the percentage it is defined in the rule. Common ITC. Common ITC. That block credit ITC need to be first available and then required to be reversed. That we have already discussed. Okay. Now apportionment of ITC. Sir, apportionment there are two issues. One apportionment we do normally month on month basis, but we normally ignore the apportionment at the year at the end of the year. Right? Apportionment if it is taxable to taxable, you claim entire credit. If it is related to only exempt supply, you will not claim, you will not be eligible for claiming that those ITC. If it is partly for the taxable and partly for the non-taxable, you will have to apportion that entire ITC in that turnover ratio. Rule 42 I am discussing. So we must be following this rule while doing the monthly compliance. But sir, whether we are just reconsidering this apportionment at the year end or not, it is a question. Because sir, kya hota hai? There are rule 42 and rule 43. When it is for the normal reversal on the input services and the capital goods, and rule 43 it is discussing about the ITC availed on the fixed asset, capital goods. Normal ITC का reversal हम शायद कर देते रहेंगे, but year end apportionment and the apportionment with respect to the capital goods, I don't think many of us we are doing or many of you are verifying or not. There is a question, right? तो and उसमें issue क्या है sir? Reversal करना it is very easy, but उसको formalize करके उसको determine करना it is little bit difficult, right? That too in your turnover ratio. And when we discuss about the capital goods in our next slide, we will see capital goods के there are certain other formulas are been defined, are given. So regarding that normal ITC apportionment, it is must. If you are not apportioning, if you are not doing the apportionment at the year end, it is definitely advisable, since we are closing the books of accounts. First, calculate the reapportionment, pass all the accounting entries before we closes the books of account, so that again there should not be a spillover effect in the next financial year. Yes, yes. Yes.
On the fire escape setup, you are not able to match. So should you take input gain on your 1/12 or the entire 1/1?
See, truly speaking, law is silent on this part. So definitely, what we are following is we are allowing the ITC in the first month itself, because when the law is silent, when the law is silent, tell me one thing, in between the year आपका insurance कहीं ये हो जाता है, so are you going to get the money back? I don't think. And see क्या होता है कि when the law is silent, so better we should take the ITC, avail the ITC when the invoice नहीं करना है. तो many things like that. So prepaid expense है ये तो many times we do such kind of अभी maintenance है for example. So then तो it is not been notified anywhere कि भाई you should take the ITC on the basis of services have been received, sir. The contractual terms are been and already the documents have been entered into. You are taken the services. Only whatever the consequential this thing would be there, it will may face in the future day. So I'm saying since once I'm entering into the any of the contractual agreement and they are issuing us the invoice. See invoice they can issue once the proviso of service gets completed. Within the 30 days from the date when the proviso of services gets completed. So if they are giving me the issue by saying that if they are entered into the transaction, if they are issuing me the tax in order, it means the services are been this thing defined. Now whatever this thing would be there, that will take care of it in the future date. Kind of insurance policy claim करना है या जो maintenance over the period. Maintenance and kind of thing में there may be a continuous supply of services. The continuous supply of services में there are some other provisions through which they are supposed to give us the continuous statement periodically, quarterly and kind of thing. If you are following that continuous supply of services ka kind of provision, then we should get the invoices on the basis of that milestone. Sir was mentioning that continuous supply kind of thing. But on the basis of what? See, just to take the abundant precaution, see क्या होता है sir? No. Jain sir, what sir is saying, there is one condition for claiming the ITC. You should have been received the goods and services before claiming the ITC. So sir is saying the insurance period is covered for entire year, right? So sir is saying whether we should apportion that and we should claim the ITC over the period of year or we should claim at the day when we are receiving the tax invoice. Just to avoid the legal consequence.
Here, it is that you are making the advance payment, but it is services you are receiving part by part. Suppose the maintenance service is there, computer maintenance, and suppose the last month of the year. How can you claim the entire ITC at the
See, basically, sir, see, just for the precaution purpose.
need of any service, any
Okay, so this will be a learning thing for learning this thing from see basically क्या होता है sir? See ITC अवेल करने में कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं, यूटिलाइजेशन में प्रॉब्लम है, राइट? अभी समझो इंश्योरेंस क्लेम है तो शायद 1 साल का ही पॉलिसी आता है. कोई मेंटेनेंस में अगर मेंटेनेंस कंप्लीट ही नहीं हुआ, सर्विसेज सर्टेन मेंटेनेंस कंप्लीट हुआ, सर्टेन मेंटेनेंस विल गेट ओवर द पीरियड ऑफ इयर्स काइंड ऑफ, मैं नेक्स्ट ईयर में मेंटेनेंस सर्विस कंप्लीट हुआ और वो टैक्स इनवॉइस नेक्स्ट पीरियड में देगा, तो ये साल का आईटीसी लैप्स हो जाएगा. आप समझो कंटिन्यूस सर्विस है और वो बंदा बोलता है इनवॉइस में आपको कंप्लीशन के बाद दूंगा, ठीक है, माइलस्टोन आपका एट द एंड ऑफ द सर्विसेज है तो आप अकॉर्डिंगली यू कैन डिसाइड. बट जहां पर टैक्स जैसे सर के केस में इनवॉइस एडवांस के टाइम पे आ जाता है.
Service provider will receive full amount. Pay for them. By signing.
Sir, many kinds of examples are there, right? But definitely we can follow the things. If the people if they're following on the basis of, see, मुझे एक बात बताइए sir, फिर on what basis you will claim the ITC? टैक्स इनवॉइस तो आपको एक ही बार आने वाला है, बट आप अपोर्शनमेंट कैसे करोगे? नो सर, वो एक और कंडीशन की बात कर रहे हैं, सर्विसेज नहीं मिली है.
पहले से छोड़ रहे हो तो मतलब ही नहीं है।
Some services may not be received at all.
then you cannot claim.
Can some contract. This is for some failure. Okay. Some part of your equipment gets some problem. Now it never occurred during the entire year. Now what you will cover?
So invoice issued. So you abandon the reverse. If there is a deficiency, no, if there is a deficiency in the service, no, right. Right. So the even officers, they are not raising the question on this part, right? So basically, but if you want to follow diligently, then definitely we should follow. Okay, by whenever insurance kind of thing, we can claim the month on the monthly basis, right? But sir, फिर क्या होता है कि भाई for every transaction purpose, we'll have to keep one more records and kind of thing.
When you are saying that the law is silent, and
No, law is silent, but one important area what they are service is not received. Services we are receiving over the period of years. This is the issue. Okay, now for calculating the common ITC, I think you all must be aware from the total credit, we are reversing the credit related to taxable supplies, credit related to exempt supplies, and credit which is ineligible. So balance whatever remaining, it is common credit. Interest, sir, it is a financial transaction and sir, certain that guidelines it is already been given. Interest, if it is related to kind of a interest on the FD and a kind of thing, reversal is not required. But interest, for example, if you are receiving the interest from your customers and kind of thing, so it is not exempt, it is taxable. Delayed payment interest, it is taxable. But otherwise, interest on FD and kind of thing, a reversal is not required. Okay. So now what care we should take? One question is there in between. What care we should take while reversal calculation under Rule 42 on the monthly basis and the annual basis at the end of the year? Sir, supplies partly used for the taxable and partly used for the exempt purpose. Raw materials purchased at the end of the year. I am not aware whether these raw materials I am going to use for the manufacturing of the taxable supplies or the exempt supplies. क्या करना पड़े? क्या करना चाहिए? Right? बट एट दैट पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम रिवर्सल के लिए कुछ रहेगा ही नहीं क्रेडिट लेजर में. आपने अवेल कर लिया, आपने अवेल करके लायबिलिटी के सामने ऑफसेट कर दिया. दैट्स व्हाट आई एम सेइंग, राइट? तो क्या होता है कि प्रैक्टिकली इट इज नॉट पॉसिबल. When you are buying the goods at that time, you are not aware whether you are going to use it for the taxable kind of supplies or the exempt kind of thing. तो आपको ले लेना है. It is not like कि आपको at that point of time you are supposed to decide. Practically not possible. You avail the credit, utilize it, and then the future whenever you have the exempt supply, proportionate ITC you are supposed to reverse. Yes, in that year only. So that's what I'm saying, apportionment on the monthly basis and apportionment at the year end. Because see क्या होता है, turnover at the monthly basis पे turnover decide करना it is very difficult. एक महीने में taxable आएगा, एक महीने में exempt आएगा. तो in the month जहाँ पर exempt turnover है वहां पर तो फिर पूरा ITC reverse हो जाएगा वो महीने का. Right. So you do the apportionment on the monthly basis and recalculate it again at the year end. Right? So जब भी आप reapportionment year end में करते हो ना, there is no consequential interest if you are reversing it by September, I think, because the law is allowing to recalculate the reapportionment and reverse the remaining ITC or reclaim. If you already reverse in a higher side, you can reclaim the balance ITC. Yes, without interest. Okay, this is the. Sir, reclaim में there is nothing is separately mentioned. आपको normal ITC जैसे अवेल करते हो वैसे ही लेना है. But if you refer GSTR 9, there in there GSTR 9 you are supposed to report, because ये क्या होगा, otherwise वो reconcile नहीं होगा reclaim ITC. So in GSTR 9, I think they have given us one table wherein you can just report the reclaim, whatever ITC you have reclaimed, which was reversed initially, that you can report in your GSTR 9. 3B में I doubt. Okay, 3B में है तो yes, 3B में तो फिर then तो 3B में you can report sir on monthly basis. Okay, separately report. Okay, so 3B and okay, it is the reconciliation. Reconciliation, sir, to be reconciliation. So I think you must be aware that every month we are supposed to reconcile. We cannot claim even a single rupee beyond whatever it is reflecting in your GST at 2B or 8A. So we are preferring 8A rather than 2B, because it is one and the same. But again, many a times non-filer ये है सारा. If you say your place of supply was outside the state and if you are claiming the ITC in this state, those kind of issues are there. So whatever it is reflecting in your GSTR 8A, GSTR 8A, those ITC, I think you are eligible and you should claim the ITC to that extent every month. Sorry, you can download the 8A. Yes, yes, you can download the 8A. 8A table, whatever ITC is reported in 8A table, you can claim. Transaction wise lists are available. I think this point we have already covered. November wala issue. Okay, 180 days ka, the ITC, the consideration should have been paid within 180 days retention wala issue. See, basically, the reverse ITC, if you are reversing anything, it is eligible for reclaim. If you can reclaim once you pay the consideration, but till that time you will have to reverse. And if you are doing the part payment, you can take it on a proportionate basis. You are paying just a part payment, but reversal. See, payment 180 day consideration payment, they includes a tax element also. It is not only the value of that supply. You are supposed to pay along with the tax within that 180 days ka timeline. So then, sir, as per your contractual terms, the payment terms can be anything. You will mention we are not supposed to pay. So we are supposed to follow that this 180 days ka rule, because it is notified rule. Okay, now advances and supplies. So ITC side almost, I think fixed asset part is remaining. We'll cover in next slide. Now advances and supplies. So basically supplies में क्या होता है? Normally whatever invoices we are raising day in day out और जो reporting होता है GSTR 1 में वो ही हम consider करते हैं, right? But there are certain hidden transactions. So basically nowadays e-invoicing, it is must up till 5 crore ka turnover and all. So most of the things we are capturing on a monthly basis only. But sir, tell me one thing. Are we considering all the kinds of supply while raising the invoice? Some of the transactions we may miss. Let's say there was a sale of scrap, right? There was a sale of fixed asset. So knowingly, unknowingly, we might be missing some of the transactions. So before we close our books of account, we should reconcile all the sales transactions, maybe sale of scrap and sale of fixed asset, or maybe any other things, right? Or even if it is a disposal of fixed asset or disposal of any of the items, we are giving free of cost. If you are giving anything to the free of cost, it is a supply, right? So we should reconcile all the supplies before we closes of our books of accounts. Okay. So tell me one thing. If you raise the export invoice as on 31st March, but actually practically speaking goods are not been exported. It is exported maybe in the next month. तो क्या करेंगे? बिकॉज आप इनवॉइस मार्च में रेज करते हो, जीरो रेटेड सप्लाई का बेनिफिट ले लेते हो, बट प्रैक्टिकली स्पीकिंग goods are not going out in the month of March itself. So government says it should be exported within a period of 90 days after filing that shipping bill and after raising that invoice. But all those documents, late export order, your shipping bill and all the evidence should be there with you for claiming the export transaction. So to reconcile the export transaction, sometimes क्या होता है, shipping bill cancel हो जाता है. Practically speaking, invoice raise कर दिया, material चला गया, but because of any other reason, shipping bill goes cancel. फिर नए साल में कोई नया shipping bill बनेगा, नया export का invoice में भी बनेगा, नहीं बनेगा, और वही export invoice के basis पे वो export हो जाएगा. So all those are the practical scenarios. So we should reconcile all those kind of transactions before closing the books of accounts. Okay, invoices are raised but goods are not supplied. उन्होंने बोला कि भाई आप इनवॉइस रेज कर दो, आई विल टेक द डिलीवरी, राइट? तो बेसिकली इनवॉइस रेज करना है, बट टिल द टाइम इफ द गुड्स, इफ इट इज नॉट बीन सप्लाइड, इफ इट इज लाइंग इन योर इन्वेंटरी, so it is up to us. If as per their instruction, if you are just keeping the delivery aside, then it is a supply for you, right? But if it is not, actually if the goods are not moving out and you just raising the invoice, then I don't think it will consider your supply or not. Okay, activities treated as a supply even without consideration. Sometimes consideration may or may not be there, but then also those kinds of transactions will be treated as a supply, right? If you just now I gave the example of disposal of fixed asset. If you are disposing of your fixed asset, there may not be consideration, but it is a supply for you. So you should raise the invoice, you should pay the GST, you should account it for it, and then you take then you give the accounting treatment accordingly after paying the GST. The disposal में basically that 5 years का condition, what you are saying, you are talking about that rule 43 and all. See, if there is a zero value, right, then accounting records में जो भी आप treatment और जो भी, if you are not assigning any of the value, then there is no consideration. For supply, the consideration is must. If the consideration, if it is not there, right, you just disposing it off, then there should not be any GST as per my belief, right? But if there is any, even a penny consideration, right, आप बेच देते हो किसी को, then whatever may be the amount, on that you should raise the invoice and you pay the GST.
So you leave that thing.
So if there is no consideration, there is no GST. If it is even a small consideration, you pay the GST. Because the supply even without consideration, GST, because ये क्या होता है sir, rule section 53 talks about the valuation, right? Valuation कौन determine करेगा? We'll only have to determine, and at the time of assessment, we only will have to prove the value of that particular disposal of fixed asset. If you can if you can prove there was no value assigned to those particular fixed asset, then there should not be any question of the GST on that element. Cross utilization and cross charge. So this is a burning issue. See, basically, right now what we are doing is we are just paying the GST only on the transaction, whatever it has been raised between the supplier and recipient and customer and the vendor and kind of thing. But the GST, when it was introduced on the basis of the locations, whatever you have across the states. On the even for the same PAN number, if you're having the multiple location, you are supposed to take the registration, you pay the GST, even if there is a cross supply from HO to branch and branch to HO and branch to branch and kind of thing. On that also GST is applicable. Initially there was Form F through which the tax was not supposed to, it was not applicable. But then post GST, even an inter-branch transaction GST is applicable. But sir, what happens कि ये cross charge में and this kind of transaction में कहीं ना कहीं tax compliance छूट जाता है, because recently when on 17th of July one circular was there, before that circular there was a great ambiguity by saying that on the self-generated kind of transaction, like let's say audit fees, your statutory auditor does the audit for the whole of your branches, but they raise the invoice only on your HO. So whether there should be any cross charge of those kind of transaction or not, right? Even for the self-generated kind of services, your CFO, your director and managing director, your marketing team had all are sitting at your corporate office, but they gives the services to all of your branches and a kind of thing. So uska cross billing hona chahiye ya nahi hona chahiye? These types of questions were there, on which there was no certain answer. But recently on 17th of July, one circular is there. It is clarifying all of our doubts by saying that if it is a self-generated kind of services, right, and if your branches, if they are eligible for claiming the ITC, right, then there is no requirement to raise the invoice, because anyhow, after you raise the invoice, they are going to get the credit. So there is no meaning in doing just such kind of compliances. But if it is a kind of thing where is a cross charge is required with respect to the expense what your HO is incurring on behalf of the branches, then in those cases cross charge is required on the basis on the proportional to their turnover. So before we closes our books of accounts, it is must to refer this circular, because it clears many of our doubts. If you are not raising, let's say give an example, normally a holding company gives the bank guarantee for the subsidiaries. Normally it is not a transaction in monetary terms, so we are not going to account for. Maybe disclosure may be there in your notes to accounts, but I don't think anybody will be accounted for in the monetary. We are not going to assign any of the amount to those guarantee, right? But it is nothing but it is a supply in between the subsidiary and the holding company. Even the corporate guarantee, right? The director gives the guarantee for the company, right? So it is a supply, right? How to determine the value, how to assign the value, it is a separate question. But certainly it is a supply and GST implications will be there. So before you close your books of account, please look upon such kind of transaction which may not be in your accounting system. You will not find such kind of transaction anywhere in your books of accounts. How to quantify? See, basically, recently only I was facing one of the assessment. At that time, this question was arise, right? By looking at about the disclosure and the notes to accounts and all. But when it comes, when we said how to then determine how to assign the value, but then what happened? Whatever banks are charging, whatever the bank charges the bank is charging, on the same line they have derived the value, and then we paid the tax. Whatever percentage bank is charging, commission and kind of thing, the same line we have determined the value and we paid the tax. Yes, definitely. If it is not a remuneration, if it is not a salary part, then yes. Apart from salary, everything if it is taxable and reverse charge is applicable. Company is supposed to pay. So then what is the service? So he is not withdrawing the remuneration, he is not withdrawing anything from the company. So there is no consideration, then there should not be any GST. But madam, so madam, directly and indirectly consideration to hota hai. I don't know whether so indirectly they are withdrawing from there maybe. So here, since in this company, if there is no consideration, if it is not been assigned to any of your that kind of supplies, I don't think GST will be applicable. But the question certainly will be there at the time of assessment. Unreported supply, I think we have discussed. Okay, now fixed asset. Sir, fixed asset mein, I think to determine and to classify whether it is a fixed asset or not, normally for the accounting purpose, we follow the accounting standard, and for the GST purpose, we are supposed to follow the GST provisions. So there is a huge difference while we'll classify any of the item as a fixed asset. GST capital goods defines under GST, it just says whatever items if you are capitalizing in your books of accounts, it is a capital goods, it is a fixed asset. Irrespective of nature of item, irrespective of any of the item, what if you have capitalized in your books of account, it is a capital goods, right? So to reconcile the fixed asset schedule vis-a-vis our this financial statements and vis-a-vis the GST records, it is must, because क्या होता है, addition of fixed assets and deletion of fixed asset normally हमारे schedule में चला जाता है, but whether the effect of the same, whether we have considered while filing the GST returns or not, if deletion of fixed asset है, so whether on those deleted items whether I have paid the GST, if it was applicable, तो वो देखना जरूरी है, because क्या होता है कि देयर कैन बी एनी सिनेरियो, मैंने किसी को फ्री में दे दिया लैपटॉप टू माय एम्प्लॉय, राइट, बट देन GST certainly will be there. As we said in a schedule item, it covers the supplies. If even if the consideration of it is not been assigned, GST will be applicable, right? Gift का provision 50,000 का है, but if your value of it was, if say it was beyond 50,000, then yes, GST was applicable. तो कहीं knowingly unknowingly अगर कोई provision, अगर कोई compliance छूट जाता है, तो before you close your fixed asset का schedule, just reconcile all your fixed asset related items vis-a-vis your books of accounts versus your GST records, right? Depreciation, if you claim the depreciation on that GST element, then you will not claim the ITC. ITC, if it is not taken on the ineligible block credit, the GST component should be added to your cost of fixed asset. If it is a block, a motor car, if it ITC, if it is not available, then you should capitalize it. Okay, हाँ, ये important है sir. See, जब भी when we are entering into any of the transaction with the job worker, तो job worker के लिए provision ये था कि if any of the goods or inputs if you are sending to the job worker, तो within a year's time वो process होके वापस आ जाना चाहिए था. तो normally वो तो हो जाता है because वो day in day supply होता है. But when we talk about the fixed asset, if you have given any of the machinery and equipments to our job worker, so the timeline it is defined as 3 years, apart from your molds and jigs and all. So it is very much necessary to verify whether any of the capital goods, if it is lying with the job worker and if the 3 years are now now it is getting over, so that compliance should be done. उसको वापस लेके if you want to send again, तो वो that thing we should do it before the closure of the books of accounts. Otherwise, on this fixed asset ka value, you are supposed to pay, it will deemed as a supply from the date when the initial date when it was supplied to the job worker, and you will be end up with the paying the GST along with the interest. Okay, like what we said, the apportionment of the ITC on related to the normal input and input services, the apportionment is required with respect to the capital goods also. But capital goods में एक challenge है. Capital goods में if you are selling it off before the 5 years, see GST में हर एक capital goods का life it is assigned, right? 60 months, 5 years. कोई भी fixed asset है, if you are availing the ITC, the life assigned is 5 years. आपको हर एक मंथ में 5% आपको ये कैलकुलेट करके यू आर सपोज टू डिटरमाइन दी बैलेंस लाइफ एंड अकॉर्डिंगली आईटीसी विल हैव टू बी रिवर्स. लेट्स से आपने एक मशीनरी परचेस किया था, यू हैव वेल्ड द आईटीसी, बट आफ्टर द 3 years यू आर सेलिंग इट ऑफ, राइट? तो रूल में ये बोला गया है कि इफ यू आर सेलिंग इट ऑफ दैट फिक्स्ड एसेट विद इन द पीरियड ऑफ दैट 5 years, तो आपको आईटीसी रिवर्स करना है अंडर रूल 43. नाउ व्हाट शुड बी द कैलकुलेशन सेज कि आपको 60 months से divide करके you are supposed to calculate the remaining life and all accordingly. Whatever proportionate ITC it was there, you should compare it with your sales price. If that old machinery, used machinery, if you are going to sell it off and if you are going to get some of the consideration through that sale, so whichever is higher, that amount of ITC you are supposed to reverse, right? But यहाँ पर एक catch ये है sir, as I said, GST is on a transaction based tax. एक है रिवर्सल ऑफ आईटीसी बिकॉज आई एम सेलिंग इट ऑफ विद इन दैट पीरियड ऑफ 5 years, एंड एक है आई एम सेलिंग दैट यूज्ड मशीनरी, राइट, अल्टीमेटली उसका सेल भी तो होने वाला है. सो बोथ द ट्रांजेक्शन विल बी कंसिडर सेपरेटली. नॉर्मली क्या होना चाहिए कि दोनों का डिफरेंस जो आता है वो पे करके वो क्लोज हो जाना चाहिए, बट अनफॉर्चुनेटली rule says you are supposed to reverse the ITC if you are selling it off within a period of 5 years proportionately, whichever is higher, either the amount of ITC or the consideration, right? बट यहाँ पर हाइट ये है कि ITC भी रिवर्स करना है और जो सेल्स वैल्यू है उस पर GST भी भरना है, both. And if you are not if you are not doing this apportionment, if you are not reversing this ITC on time, उस पर इंटरेस्ट एलिमेंट आएगा. नॉर्मली वहां पर यहाँ पर अपोर्शनमेंट करना है, बट अगर डिले हुआ तो विथ इंटरेस्ट है, राइट. वहां पर आपको सितंबर तक का टाइम दिया गया है नॉर्मल अपोर्शनमेंट रूल 42 में. वहां पर देयर इज नो इंटरेस्ट अप टिल सितंबर. यहाँ पर डिले पे इमीडिएटली इंटरेस्ट है. सो कैपिटल गुड्स में इफ यू आर सेलिंग इट ऑफ, यस सर.
तो सेल का जो डिफरेंस अपने को रिवर्स करना चाहिए या फुल अमाउंट.
सर एक प्रोविजन है रिवर्सल ऑफ आईटीसी का, इफ यू आर सेलिंग इट ऑफ विद इन द पीरियड ऑफ 5 years, तो वो तो क्लियर है, करना ही को रिवर्सल करना है. रिवर्सल क्या करना है, द ITC proportionate to the remaining period, right, or the consideration what you are going to get on that element, whichever is the higher amount, to that extent ITC you are supposed to reverse. तो ये तो रिवर्सल का प्रोविजन हो गया, राइट. अपोजिट साइड GST, it is applicable on all the supplies. So impliedly you are also selling it off, that you are also that a fixed asset or the machinery you are selling it off to the someone else, right. You are going to raise the invoice, so it is also nothing but the supply. तो उस पे सप्लाई कंसीडर करके उसको सेपरेटली GST पे करना है. डबल हो गया, बट अनफॉर्चुनेटली रिप्रेजेंटेशन वाज फाइल्ड, राइट, बट येट देयर इज नो क्लैरिटी ऑन दिस. तो राइट नाउ a reversal of ITC and the payment of GST on the supply both will be applicable. The same time. No, it is not same. It is different. Those are different transactions.
If you have applied that,
If you have not availed the ITC, so then there is no question of reversal.
So what about
Motor car में तो anyhow it is not eligible. If it is a commercial kind of thing, तो yes. Otherwise, it is not applicable. Sale of motor car में sir, it is a used motor car. तो one separate rules are been notified. Margin of supply. You are supposed to calculate the margin of supply. Margin of supply कैसे calculate होता है? Your sale consideration minus the remaining WDV as per your income tax provision. जो भी आपका particular motor car का WDV आता है, उसका difference देना है. अगर if it is positive margin तो GST आएगा. If it is a negative margin, then there will not be GST. Only on the difference, yes. Positive difference. Yeah. If it is margin, if it is positive, then yes. The margin, if it is negative, then no. Okay, reverse charge. Reverse charge में I will not discuss anything in detail, but one thing I would like to discuss here is, sir, reverse charge में compliance तो I think हम लोग कर देते हैं, right? But sir इसमें दो चीज है. एक है the duty paid document, जिसके बेसिस पे आप आफ्टर पेमेंट you are immediately claiming the credit. So are we preparing the self generated tax invoice? Reverse charge में once you pay the tax under reverse charge, the ITC, it is not what I should say, ITC not immediately you should not claim the ITC. You should claim the ITC, but parallelly you should prepare one self generated tax invoice, because ITC it is allowable only on the basis of valid duty paid document. Entitlement should be there for claiming the ITC. Without any of the document, just putting the figures in your GST 3P and a kind of thing, that ITC it is not eligible. So if you are paying any of the tax under reverse charge mechanism, then you first pay the tax in the same month itself. Just ensure the assessee or the taxpayer, they are just generating that invoices on the tax invoice or self-generated tax invoice, and the basis of that tax invoice हमको accounting करना है for claiming the ITC, and accordingly you should claim the ITC. Yes. No, self-generated में invoice is not required. Okay. Sir, एक चीज है, while closing of the books of accounts, are we reconciling all those transactions related to reverse charge and all? Are we doing the proper account? Are we giving the proper accounting treatments to all those transactions or not? It is very much important. Because ये क्या होता है nowadays, what we are facing, whenever कभी नया assessment और कुछ आता है, what they are suggesting or what they are asking for, they are asking you please reconcile all your expense items with the GST and wherever you are, if you have complied for the reverse charge or the block credit kind of thing, you reconcile all those items with all your ledgers, expense side. So it is very much difficult for us to reconcile because ये क्या होता है, if the company is small then it is possible, but when we are discussing about the huge company, then reconciliation it is not possible. But if you are closing the books of account, at that point of time, if you are maintaining this kind of reconciliation, if you are maintaining separate heads, if you are maintaining separate ledgers for those kind of transaction, then at the time of assessment, it will be very much easier for us to provide the reconciliation. Or sometimes क्या होता है, we normally do the compliance by looking at upon the narration item. अगर नरेशन में प्रॉपर नरेशन लिखा है तो रिवर्स चार्ज का कंप्लायंस हो जाता है. अगर नरेशन ही बराबर नहीं लिखा है, we are not aware, अभी फॉर एग्जांपल कोई कंसल्टेंसी फीस दिया है, we don't know whether he is an advocate and whether he is a legal service provider or not, right? So unless until if the narration of it is proper, then reverse charge ka compliance it is not possible. So the accounting point of view, or before we closes of the books of account, we should make sure that the narration and entries are been validly posted in the respective ledgers, and accordingly the reverse charge compliance are been done. सर एक्चुअली स्पीकिंग आपको पे तो करना पड़ेगा विथ इंटरेस्ट, राइट, बिकॉज वो कंप्लायंस आपको छूट गया है. फॉर क्लेमिंग ऑफ आईटीसी व्हाट वी आर सजेस्टिंग, आप क्लेम कर लो, बट कहीं ना कहीं उसको इफ इट इज नॉट वर्किंग कैपिटल, इफ इट इज नॉट इफेक्टिंग, तो उसको क्लेम करके कहीं ना कहीं रिवर्स कर लो, एंड फिर जाके जैसे असेसमेंट होता है उसको रिक्लेम कर लो. अदरवाइज फिर क्या होगा, दैट फॉर क्लेमिंग द आईटीसी व्हाट एवर टाइमलाइन इट इज बीन डिफाइंड, they are not talking about whether this timeline it is only for the forward change अपना normal ITC or for the reversal. Separate timelines are not been defined, otherwise फिर वो reversal आ जाएगा. Okay, these are the items on which reverse charge is applicable. It's just a self-explanatory, so I'm not going into detail. Okay, related party transaction. So distinct person we already defined. Inter-transaction also liable to tax, we already discussed. वैल्यूएशन नॉर्मली चैलेंज होता है. वैल्यूएशन कैसे डिटरमाइन करना है, तो वैल्यूएशन में देयर इज ओपन मार्केट वैल्यू, इफ इट इज अवेलेबल देन ओपन मार्केट वैल्यू, अदरवाइज लाइक काइंड लाइक नेचर kind of transaction you can select for determining the value, or otherwise residual value or the self declare whatever value if you are assigning. Even in the circular 17 July wala circular mein it says if kind of cross charge kind of thing, if any of the value it has been defined by given in on those particular invoices, it will be accepted without raising any of the further question. If you are doing the cross charge internally, and if you are assigning any of the value and the ITC is validly it is eligible, then whatever value assigned on those particular invoices, it will be accepted. So for this related party transaction, indirectly we have covered bank guarantee, indirectly we have covered self-generated services, indirectly we have covered audit fees kind of transaction. But sir, बिफोर द क्लोजर ऑफ द बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट, वो सर्कुलर जो आया है वो प्लीज रेफर कर लीजिए बिफोर यू क्लोज योर बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट, बिकॉज क्या होता है कि अदरवाइज इट विल कॉस्ट यू मच. ऑडिट फीस है, इंश्योरेंस है, आपका आईटी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर फैसिलिटी पूरा हेड ऑफिस में होता है, आपके जो जीमेल के जो आपके लाइसेंसेस होते हैं वो भी हम लोग सेंट्रली प्रोक्योर करते हैं, राइट. सो दिस काइंड ऑफ ट्रांजेक्शंस आर देयर वेयर इन. फिर प्रॉब्लम क्या होता है कि अगर फ्यूचर में आप क्रॉस चार्ज करना भी चाहते हो तो ITC will be challenge for claiming the ITC at the branch level. It will be challenge because then the timeline will not permit. So before you close your books of account, please refer that circular जो cross charge related recently आया है, so that accordingly billing can be done, and the ITC if it is eligible at the branch level, it can be claimed within that eligible time. allowable time limit. ओके, रिलेटेड पार्टी ट्रांजेक्शन में सर एक चैलेंज ये है कि नॉर्मली बुक्स में एंट्रीज नॉक ऑफ हो जाती है, राइट? लेकिन आफ्टर दिस जीएसटी सिनेरियो व्हाट वी आर ऑब्जर्विंग, मेनी टाइम्स जो गुड्स प्रोक्योर किया जाता है और जो सर्विसेज प्रोक्योर किया जाता है, अल्टीमेटली वेयर वी आर गोइंग टू यूज इट और वेयर वी आर गोइंग टू कंज्यूम इट, वो डिफाइंड नहीं होता है. So basically on this front we should advise to our client, if any of the goods or any of the services we are procuring it for any of the particular location, better you procure it there only, rather than taking the invoices on the HO level, or rather than procuring. For example, many a times I have seen मशीन कुछ रॉ मटेरियल इंपोर्ट हो जाता है इंडिया में, मतलब पर्टिकुलर से जैसे नावा शेवा मुंबई में इंपोर्ट हुआ, बट फर्दर अल्टीमेटली वो कंजम्पशन इनडायरेक्टली कहीं और स्टेट में जाके होता है. सो सी क्या होता है कि ultimately if it is getting consumed in some other states, so then it is very much imperative to look upon all those contractual documents, whether that ultimately the state where the raw material were consumed or used for rendering the services or while doing those kind of supply, whether those transaction it was with the HO or with the branches, right? Otherwise यहाँ पर क्या होगा कि ultimately यहाँ पर ITC रिवर्सल आ जाएगा if it is not proved that ultimately it was used for the furtherance of business of this HO, right? And if you are not cross billed, तो फिर ultimately then you will end up with the reversal of all those ITC. So before you close off accounts, whatever internal external transactions, so you must be having your PO, you must be having your delivery, all the supporting documents will be there, contractual documents. But when it comes to your internal transaction, यहाँ पर कोई contractual document होता नहीं है, right? And यहाँ पर see GST while doing the internal billing, अगर GST compliance हो जाता है तो ठीक है, अदरवाइज फिर यहाँ पर भी रिवर्सल है, और आगे जाके अगर आप करते भी हो along with interest तो वहां पर ITC का इशू आ जाएगा. So better wherever there is a multiple locations, if it is there, so just ensure that all your internal billing should be done on time, and whatever records or the documents which we are supposed to generate, or normally what documents we are maintaining for our external customers, same kind of documents we are supposed to maintain for our internal locations also. Reconciliation, so as I said, sir, many types of reconciliations are applicable. Turnover should be reconciled with the books vis-a-vis GST 3 vis-a-vis GST 1 vis-a-vis multiple locations, right? Then activities treated as a supply even without consideration deemed supply, we have discussed. Classification, sir, यहाँ पर एक challenge है. We are being a chartered accountant, we are not, I should not say we cannot do it, but so basically when the multiple types of goods and services and commodities are there in the market, to classify the goods in that particular chapter heading and to determine that HSN classification, sometimes it becomes a challenge, because we are not expert in with respect to each and every industry. Chemical, let's say take an example of the chemical. There are many types of chemicals are available, and many types of chemical might be falling under different chapter headings. So sometimes it becomes difficult for us to determine the proper classification. यहाँ पर चैलेंज एक है, क्लासिफिकेशन गलत हो गया, HSN गलत हो गया, तो एक गाइडलाइंस आया था जहां पर बोला गया था कि HSN अगर गलत होगा तो देयर विल नॉट बी पेनल एक्शन, बट अगर बिकॉज ऑफ दैट रॉन्ग क्लासिफिकेशन अगर आपका GST का रेट गलत आ गया तो देन देयर विल बी इशू. So only the thing what I would advise, if you are considering the nature of industry and the nature of goods and services, if the classification it should be revisited frequently vis-a-vis the classification, I mean to say HSN vis-a-vis the GST rate throughout the period. If there is no change, there is no amendment, if you are following proper way, then there is no issue. But before the closure of books of account, if the rates were changed or the classifications were changed accordingly, ये documents में, tax invoices में it should be captured. समटाइम्स क्या होता है, मस्सा मेंटेन करते हैं सिस्टम में, ऑटोमेटिक होता है, जैसे वो सेल्स इनवॉइसेस सिस्टम से निकल जाता है, तो वहां पर wherever the must require modification we should consider before the closure of the books of account. रिम्बर्समेंट पे लास्ट एक पर्टिकुलर इस पे ले लेते हैं। रिम्बर्समेंट समटाइम्स क्या होता है सर, अनरिपोर्टेड सप्लाईज जो मैंने बोला उसमें वन ऑफ द इम्पोर्टेंट टॉपिक इज रिम्बर्समेंट ऑफ द एक्सपेंस। सर रिम्बर्समेंट ऑफ एक्सपेंस आपको कहाँ मिलता है बुक्स में? नहीं, विच हेड? travel and conveyance. Other than that, so it will depend on nature of reimbursement, right? It will depend on the nature of expense, right? If it is related to travel, then we'll find it under travel and kind of thing. Sir क्या होता है, unreported supply में ये भी एक part है। Sir reimbursement, whether it is taxable under GST or not, if I raise this question, are there any certain answer to this question?
There is a proof.
So I am a chartered accountant, I'm going for some audits, right? I'm incurring the travel expense, right? And
Proofs are attached.
I'm having the tickets, I'm having travel tickets, so air tickets I'm having with me, and I'm claiming that reimbursement from you. Okay. Any other view? Any other view? Sorry? Okay, so another example is payment of taxes. I'm paying income tax on behalf of my client and I'm claiming the reimbursement. So it's another example. Okay, then, okay, so let me conclude this point. See, reimbursement, actually speaking, if you want to say it is a pure reimbursement, then the rules are been defined, pure agent, right? You should go through those rules, pure agent ka rules. If all the conditions are defined under that pure agent ka rules, if your transaction satisfied all those conditions, then there will not be GST. Otherwise, certainly there will be GST. Same as service tax. Yes, but sir क्या होता है reimbursement normally क्या होता है? अभी मैं सर का एग्जांपल लेता हूँ पहले टैक्स वाला। टैक्स वाले में क्या होता है सर, whatever I'm paying for my client, for example, I'm paying say 10,000 income tax as a self-assessment tax I'm paying from my bank account, and then I'm claiming from my client along with my fees. So there should not be GST, because whatever I'm claiming for my client, it is at actual reimbursement, and I'm having that supporting of income tax challan ka detail documents with me. So certainly there will not be any GST on that reimbursement of tax part. But when it comes to the travel expense, right? ट्रैवल एक्सपेंस में सर क्या होता है, मेनी टाइम्स वो रूल सेटिस्फाइड, कंडीशन सेटिस्फाइड नहीं होगी। सी कंडीशंस क्या बोलता है प्योर एजेंट का, इफ यू आर इनकरिंग एनी ऑफ द एक्सपेंस ऑन बिहाफ ऑफ योर क्लाइंट, राइट, एज पर देयर इंस्ट्रक्शन, राइट, एंड all the documents as per the contractual terms, it is on their name, you are just facilitating that transaction, right? You are not incurring that transaction on your own behalf, for your own purpose. So such kind of transaction, if it is getting satisfied, then certainly you can claim the reimbursement. But if these conditions are not satisfied, if a travel expense I'm incurring for my convenience purpose, right, I'm going by air, right, and I'm claiming that air travel from my client. So sir, basically he is not dictated the terms. He was not like कि भाई आपको ट्रेन में जाना है या फ्लाइट में जाना है, कैसे जाना है, and actually it was not his obligation, right? I am adding it up that element of those transaction in my fees, and I'm claiming it from my client, then certainly there will be GST. Then this way you cannot just claim the reimbursement, and accordingly क्या होगा, the value of your professional fees, the valuation rule defined under section 15 of the GST Act, accordingly you cannot reduce your value of your fees by claiming this way of reimbursement. So certainly there will be a GST unless and until is satisfied all the conditions, whatever it has been stipulated under the rules. Okay, रिकंसिलेशन की मैटर आती है। मुझे एक बात बताए, टैक्स ऑडिट कितने लोग करते हैं यहाँ पर? एनीबडी वी आर इनटू द टैक्स ऑडिट काइंड ऑफ थिंग? क्लोज 44 जो है टैक्स ऑडिट का, कंप्लायंस होता है? हाँ सर, इट इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट। मेरे ख्याल से तो क्वालिफिकेशन ही जाता रहेगा, डिस्क्लेमर क्वालिफिकेशन रादर, राइट? सर बेसिकली क्या है, इनिशियल पीरियड में वो एग्जेम्पशन दिया था, ऑप्शनल 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 ऑप्शनल, बट अभी प्रॉब्लम क्या हो रहा है, जीएसटी में ऑप्शनल चल रहा है और आईटीआर एंड 3CD में वो कंपलसरी कर दिया है, राइट। और जब ये कभी याद कभी आता है, जब भी 3CD हाथ में लेते तभी याद आता है। बुक्स क्लोज हो गया, बैलेंस शीट बन गया, जीएसटी के रिटर्न्स चले गए, सब हो गया, राइट। अकाउंट्स भी क्लोज हो गया। अभी मैं अगर क्लाइंट के पास जाता हूँ कि भाई ये डिटेल्स लगेगा, तो देन अल्टीमेटली इट्स अ काइंड ऑफ पोस्टमार्टम, right? So while closing the books of account, if we just keep in our mind all those kind of requirement, so well within the time, if we advise to our client, then definitely, certainly this kind of reporting, it is possible rather than giving just the qualification, right? See, SQs, see, law में क्या है, if it is defined law, then I don't think SQ should be there. आप खाली क्वालिफिकेशन दे दोगे, इट वाज देन फिर क्या होता है, अल्टीमेटली वो रिपोर्टिंग सफर, जो उसका स्टेटमेंट, दैट फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट, इट गोस सफर। आई डोंट नो व्हाट वुड बी द consequences इन फ्यूचर, wherever we have given the qualification, उसका क्या रिपरकशन असेसमेंट में आएगा, बट अल्टीमेटली क्लाइंट विल से कि आपने बोला रहता तो हम प्रोवाइड करते थे, राइट। So better if we inform to our client well within the time before we closes our books of account, then certainly this kind of reporting, it is, I'm not saying it is very easy, it is very complex, but if you are informing before, well within the time before the closure of the books of account, then at least some of the information we can derive from those books. Abhi sale of goods and this is from the ITR, from ITR 6. It is asking for the sale of goods and sale of services. Tell me one thing, GSTR 3B or GSTR 1, are there anywhere where we can find whether those, wherever the sales I have reported in GSTR 3B or GSTR 1, are we classifying those supply under goods and services? No, it is GST report. It is not asking. Returns are there. It is not asking about the supply, whether it is supply of goods or services. But ITR में they are asking, right? So if the client, if they are maintaining in the tally backup and kind of thing, today if they can, we can derive. Otherwise, so then at the time of filing of ITR, we'll stuck. This is the GST and wise turnover we are supposed to report in the ITR. मुझे बताइए सर, ये वैल्यू कहाँ से लेने का, 3B से लेने का, 1 से लेने का? हाँ, 26 एज में तो आई थिंक 3B से आता है, 3B से आता है। सर आईटीआर में जो हम लोग रेवेन्यू फ्रॉम ऑपरेशन रिपोर्ट करते हैं वो इससे मैच हो जाएगा? सेल ऑफ फिक्स एसेट आएगा, और क्या आएगा? ब्रांड ट्रांसफर के ट्रांजेक्शन कहाँ आएंगे? यहाँ पर आएंगे, वहां नहीं आएगा, राइट? तो then ultimately it's a matter of reconciliation. I don't know assessment में ये लोग मैच करके ultimately what they are going to achieve, but since they are asking for the turnover GST invoice, if it is readily available, if it is matching before we close our turnover revenue from operation, if we are reconciling it with this ITR का requirement, then it is a must. Okay, 3CD report में there are 2-3 requirements. Close 44 I already discussed. Refund related requirements they are asking for. What was the refund? What was it was claimed? Whether it was allowed? ITC में what was the opening balance? What was availed? What was utilized? And what is the closing balance? So if we are reconciling our electronic credit ledger, electronic cash ledger vis-a-vis our books, then this kind of reporting would be much easier. This is close 44, what we discussed little bit later. Okay, checklist. Sir, documents plays the important role under GST. And यही एक एरिया है जहां पर वी आर लेगिंग, बिकॉज क्या होता है, एवरी मंथ का कंप्लायंस हम लोग अकाउंटिंग जो रिपोर्ट या जो एक सॉफ्टवेयर है उसके बेसिस पे अकाउंटिंग, अपना अकाउंटिंग जो हुआ है उसके बेसिस पे कंप्लायंस हो जाता है, राइट? अरिथमेटिकल कैलकुलेशन वी नॉर्मली वी डज एंड वी जस्ट फाइल आवर मंथली रिटर्न्स, बट व्हेन इट कम्स टू द डॉक्यूमेंट समथिंग न्यू इट गेट्स इमर्ज। यहाँ पर क्या होता है सर, टैक्स इनवॉइस है, but it should be supported with the bill of entry and LR. Tell me one thing, sir. If any of your client, if they are into the supply of goods, are they reconciling all their transactions with the EWA bills and the LR? I don't think so. Any of, because see क्या होता है sir, EWA bill का portal if you see, EWA bill का portal it is available only for a certain period of time. Say एक week का मिलता है, then if you want to download for the past period, then EWA bill का report I don't think you can download, right? So whether before the closure of the books of accounts, are we reconciling all of our supplies with the e-way bill, whatever it was generated on my GSTN number? So if we give some of the importance to the documents, otherwise फिर future में क्या होगा, वो e-way bill लेके आ जाएंगे कि आपका ये e-way bill था, where is the invoice, right? So e-way bill, it is only for the movement of goods, but movement, whenever when the goods we are moving, either it may be for the supply of goods or maybe for other than for the supply, right? Maybe for we are sending the goods to the job worker, but ultimately it is supposed to be reported somewhere, reconciled somewhere in our books of accounts. Delivery challenge we have already discussed. TDS TCS statement, सर ये बर्निंग इशू है, इमीडिएटली नोटिस आ रहा है. यहाँ पर एक है उनका पोर्टल जिसके बेसिस पे नोटिस आता है, और एक है हमारे रिकॉर्ड्स जिसके बेसिस पे हम कंप्लायंस करते हैं. टेल मी वन थिंग, our revenue, whether it should match with the GST and turnover or not, right? But what about the TDS reporting? When if we are entering into any of the transaction with the government department, they are supposed to deduct the TDS. तो वो जो TDS डिडक्ट करते हैं उसका वो लोग वैल्यू असाइन करते हैं, whatever payment they does, उस पे TDS 1% डिडक्ट करते हैं. तो now what system does, सिस्टम क्या करता है, वो TDS का the value on which the TDS deducted by the government department, the system compares those value with our GST and turnover. So then ultimately it's a matter of reconciliation. I might be getting the payment over the maybe in the next financial year. Invoice was raised in the previous financial year. Ultimately it's a matter of reconciliation. But whether we are maintaining this reconciliation or not, it is a question. Shipping bill आता है, but late export order ALEO कोई दिखता है कि नहीं दिखता, I don't know, right? Unless and until ALEO is filed, your export you cannot prove. Just filing the shipping bill, I don't think you can say your goods are moved out of India unless and until you refer that ALEO report, right? ALEO, late export order. That normally customs, what they do, once the consignment goes out, they file their report by vessel number so and so, the goods are gone out on so and so date. So with our shipping bill, that ALEO reference number and that order should be there to prove that actually the goods are gone out. Customs, yes. Even if you're going for the refund purpose, they ask for this export ALEO का details. Online, yes, but sometimes क्या होता है, portal update नहीं होता है sir. Sorry, but sir sometimes portal ये देता है, reference देता नहीं, so then again we'll have to approach to the custom authority by saying that please provide me those details so that I can claim the refund. Otherwise, to that extent, your refund will stuck. What? Export of services means, let's say, implied services. So whatever documents we are maintaining internally on the test only the place of supply. If you are saying I am exporting the service, then the test of that place of supply should be satisfied. Conditions satisfied under the place of supply, all those conditions should be satisfied, right? And with that all export ka conditions, right? 0.1% merchant export sale. Sir, tell me one thing. Are we maintaining all those documents? If, for example, I'm selling some of the goods to the registered dealer, ultimately he is registered with the export council and he was supposed to export all those goods. The condition stipulated for this merchant export is like that. He was supposed to file the shipping bill with the custom with all my GST number by referring my invoice number by saying that the goods are been procured by from so and so supplier, and within 90 days those goods should be exported. But after exporting the goods along with the shipping bill and invoices, those records should be submitted to the actual supplier and their GST officer, proper officer. I don't think ये compliance कोई करता है, right? But sir यहाँ पर अभी issue क्या आ रहा है, ये assessment के time पे ये record मांगते हैं. If you offered 0.1% GST in your GST 1 and 3B, तो assessment के time पे ये record मांग रहे हैं. If you are not in a position to provide all those documents, तो actual rate से assessment करके along with interest वो GST का liability calculate कर रहे हैं. So better whenever we are entering into this kind of transaction, please maintain the proper records. Credit note and debit note. So credit note, debit note तो उनको पसंद है, credit note पसंद नहीं है, right? Because we are reversing that turnover, we are reversing that tax. Unless until the provision defined under section 34, if all the conditions defined under 34 says there was a revision in rate, there was a deficiency in services, the goods were returned. If such kind of instances are there, definitely well within that allowable time limit, you can raise the credit note, you can maintain the supporting records. But if credit note, it has been raised beyond that timeline, then definitely they will not allow you to reverse this tax. So while raising the credit note, be little bit cautious, right? Timeline September wala, it's the same. एक ये भी यस सर क्रेडिट नोट डेबिट नोट इशू कौन करता है एक ये भी एक थोड़ा एक कंफ्यूजन है इन इंडस्ट्री डेबिट नोट और क्रेडिट नोट कौन इशू करेगा फॉर एग्जांपल आई एम द सेलर यू आर द बायर एंड डेबिट नोट समझो बायर सब बायर इज फेसिंग सम इशू इन वन ऑफ द ट्रांजेक्शन सेलर को तो क्या सर बेच दिया इनवॉइस रेज कर दिया सब खत्म हो गया पेमेंट आ गया लेट्स से पेमेंट भी आ गया चलो नाउ बायर इज फेसिंग सम प्रॉब्लम sir is right see basically debit note or credit note should be initiated by the person who has initially initiated that transaction sometimes क्या होता है मैं क्रेडिट नोट देता हूँ वो डेबिट नोट देता है ये तो चलता रहेगा फिर सी एक होता है कि अकाउंटिंग करना है और एक होता है कि डॉक्यूमेंट को पोर्टल पे चढ़ाना है राइट सो अनलेस अल्टीमेटली डॉक्यूमेंट पोर्टल पे नहीं तो पोर्टल पे चढ़ाएगा कौन बेसिकली मैंने इनवॉइस रेज किया था तो आई ओनली कैन रेक्टिफाई दैट ट्रांजेक्शन इन माय जीएसटीएन so I only can raise the debit note or I only can raise the credit note rather than asking for debit note and credit note from the customer, right? So supplier only you should raise the debit note and credit note to give the appropriate effects on the GST portal as well as their books of account. And accordingly, on the basis of those transactions, the recipient should pass the entry in their books of account. So ITC, though, I think you can claim yes. Yes. Okay, receipt voucher and payment voucher. Sir, receipt payment voucher कोई maintain करता है? कौन करता है? Sir, receipt payment voucher में क्या है? Okay, before we move to the receipt payment voucher, one credit note and debit note पे एक छोटा सा point ले लेता हूँ. Sir, credit note and debit note it is defined under GST कि कौन से transaction में you can raise the debit credit note. But sir, there are some new things which are emerging. Every time, is it required to give the effect of GST while raising the debit note and credit note? कोई ट्रांजेक्शन ऐसा होता है कि जहाँ पे जीएसटी का इम्प्लीकेशन नहीं होता है राइट तो देर आर फाइनेंशियल डेबिट नोट क्रेडिट नोट एंड देर आर जीएसटी एंड डेबिट नोट क्रेडिट नोट इफ यू वांट टू गिव द इफेक्ट ऑफ जीएसटी देन रेज द जीएसटी वाला डेबिट नोट क्रेडिट नोट एंड अपलोड इट ऑन द पोर्टल and if the GST implication if it is not required and just pass the financial debit note credit note in your books of account and accordingly you can close those transactions. Okay, receipt payment vouchers में क्या है सर सर्विसेज में एडवांसेस पे टैक्स लगता है तो एट दैट टाइम वी शुड issue the receipt voucher along with the GST advance receipt voucher. Payment voucher में because of any reason if the deal goes cancelled accordingly you should give the payment refund voucher along with the GST. Accordingly all those records should be maintained in our this thing. Otherwise क्या होगा compliance would become difficult. If any of your return, if you just to offer those advances in your GST return, how to quantify, how to identify those transactions, whether it was liable for GST or it was just other kind of advances. So while doing the account, while maintaining the accounting records, you please maintain all those receipt payment vouchers which are required under GST and along with the GST, so that appropriate effect can be given in the GST return.
As far as the financial, is it to be document part of the GST one?
No. It's just an internal document. सर वो आई डोंट थिंक सी उसमें क्या है सर जीएसटी रिलेटेड डॉक्यूमेंट्स जो है सी ऐसे तो बहुत सारे वाउचर आप रेज करते हो डेप्रिसिएशन का एंट्री पास करते हो मेनी टाइम्स यू पास मल्टीपल ऑफ एंट्रीज यू पास इन योर बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स इंटरनल आप कॉन्ट्रा एंट्री पास करते हो एवरी टाइम यू आर नॉट सपोज टू सी अल्टीमेटली इट्स अ रिकॉर्ड्स अल्टीमेटली इट्स अ वाउचर एंट्री वाउचर यू शुड बी मेंटेन But GSTN में देने के लिए only I think you should report the documents which are on which you have taken the GST का effect. Yes, sir. Electronic documents are okay. Okay, what are the documents required? Tax invoice it is required for the taxable supplies. Bill of supply is required for the bill of exempt supplies. Debit credit note we have already discussed. Delivery challan हमने discuss किया है. For the any kind of movement of goods. Sir, are we maintaining the delivery challan and the e-way bill for every kind of movement of the goods? Huh? Sir, delivery challan कहाँ जरूरी है? If your transaction it is accompanied with the tax invoice, then delivery challan is not required. Invoice will be considered as a proof of delivery of goods. Then in those cases delivery challan may or may not be required. Because उसमें condition क्या है? The tax invoice raise करने का जो condition है ना उसमें ये लिखा है along when the goods are moving out, along with that moment it should be accompanied with the tax invoice. Without that tax invoice your goods cannot move if it is a supply. So if that condition if it is there then again why it is required, then I don't think delivery challan is also required. Right? It should be वो GRN जब भी लेगा तभी tax invoice को GRN करके they will pass the entries accordingly. Apart from supply, apart from that tax invoice वाला this thing, anywhere if you are moving of your goods, without the delivery challan your goods cannot move. Which one? वो internal उनका है, but समझो delivery देते हो, while accepting the delivery they will ask for some of the documents ना. If you are giving the tax invoice then it is sufficient. If the tax invoice it was not applicable, if let's say tax invoice was not applicable, then delivery challan must. E-way bill I have covered in my earlier slide, sir. Along with e-way bill, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, e-way bill का reconciliation future में will face the music, sir. If you are not reconciling the e-way bill now, because क्या होता है e-way bill it is not in our control. E-way bill can be raised by consignee and the transporter. Sometimes transporter ने आपका GST number डाल के e-way bill बना दिया, तो आपको जब भी असेसमेंट आएगा तभी पता चलेगा भाई मेरे नाम पे e-way bill बना के कहीं ना कहीं कुछ यहाँ से वहां गया था. Department में sir only the portal is there. Nothing, even the login is given to you also, but for you what they are expecting, whatever weekly basis, whatever e-way bill it is generating on your GSTN number, you please download that report and maintain and reconcile with all your transaction. Loss. And they will then wake up after, yes, at that time we'll have to sleep then. Match with along all the kinds of movements, na sir. If you are procuring some goods from your supplier ने आपके GSTN नंबर डाल के e-way bill बना दिया, but you are not aware भाई मैंने कहां से किसी मेरे procurement team ने कहीं order place किया, you are not aware, right? तो you must not be knowing कि भाई मेरे नाम पे कोई tax invoice आना चाहिए after this procurement, right? तो जब तक tax invoice आपके टेबल पे नहीं आएगा आपको पता नहीं चलेगा ये movement हो गया है, consume भी हो गया, सब हो गया, unless and until you trace those e-way bills and all. हाँ 1 week yes. वो जूना रिपोर्ट नहीं देता है वो पोर्टल. Every day rather weekly तो करना ही है, but other than you should be constant on that particular portal. The people who are dealing in the goods ना buying and selling kind of thing, जो अपना procurement team है या जो sales team है, they should be on the parallelly they, while raising the invoice, who are raising the invoices, who are raising the PO, parallelly they should be on that e-way bill portal. Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. सर ई-वे बिल में भी चैलेंज है सर. ई-वे बिल में भी क्या है, वेदर दैट ई-वे बिल इज अ वैलिड ई-वे बिल और नॉट कैसे पता चलेगा. समटाइम्स मैंने आपको ऑर्डर प्लेस किया, आपने ट्रांसपोर्टर को अरेंज कर दिया, अरेंज करना बाकी है, आपने इनवॉइस जो भी डिलीवरी चलन बना दिया, ई-वे बिल बना दिया पोर्टल पे. ई-वे बिल में देयर आर 2 पार्ट्स, पार्ट ए पार्ट बी. पार्ट ए में डॉक्यूमेंट का डिटेल जाता है, डिलीवरी चलन टैक्स इनवॉइस का डिटेल जाता है, लेकिन ट्रांसपोर्टर आया ही नहीं, लेके ही नहीं गया, या मे भी लेके गया लेकिन पार्ट भी डाला ही नहीं, निकल गया वो, एंड आप बोलो कि हमने ई-वे बिल बना के रखा हुआ है, सो देन अल्टीमेटली इट्स इनवैलिड ई-वे बिल. It will not serve a purpose. पार्ट भी वो ज्वेलरी बुलियंस एंड ज्वेलरी में उन लोग ने एग्जाम किया था, बट अगेन उस पर नया ईवी बिल का रिसेंटली आई थिंक 1 वीक बिफोर उन्होंने वो इम्प्लीमेंट कर दिया है. पार्ट बी, पार्ट इफ इट इज रिक्वायर्ड देन पार्ट बी इज कंपल्सरी. वैल्यू वो ईवे बिल के लिए वैल्यू है. सी अगर ईवे बिल 1 लाख का वैल्यू है, इफ द 1 लाख का मूवमेंट इज देयर देन ईवे बिल इज रिक्वायर्ड, एंड वंस द ईवे बिल इफ इट इज रिक्वायर्ड देन पार्ट ए पार्ट बी बोथ आर रिक्वायर्ड.
बता देता है आपको
यस यस
हमारे नाम का
यस यस यस. ट्रांसपोर्टर में सर क्या होता है कि समझो वो सर ट्रांसपोर्टर में डिपेंड आपका कैसे फुल लोड है पार्ट लोड है, वो कंसोलिडेटेड ईवे बिल भी बनाता है. 100 लोगों का साथ में लेके जाएगा तो उसको कंसोलिडेटेड ईवे बिल भी बनाना है. देखो सर पार्ट ए पार्ट बी तो जो कंसाइनर एंड कंसाइनी वही पार्ट ए जनरेट करते हैं. पार्ट बी में कभी कभी ट्रांसपोर्टर अपना व्हीकल का डिटेल डाल के वो क्लोज कर देते हैं. सो बेटर आपके पास वैलिड ईवे बिल होना चाहिए अलोंग विद दैट पार्ट ए एंड पार्ट बी, अदरवाइज कोई मीनिंग नहीं है ईवे बिल का. नहीं सर पहले तो आपका ईवे बिल बनेगा ना, कंसोलिडेटेड तो वो बाद में बनाएगा. पहले तो आपको जनरेट करना है, देन वो कंसोलिडेटेड करेगा. तो यू हैव टू कीप दैट बोथ द डॉक्यूमेंट. Sorry, e-way bill is required when there is a movement of goods in a motorized vehicle. If it is in a hand cart or if it is a hand delivery, then e-way bill is not required. But then sir value और quantum को तो volume को भी तो देखोगे ना. नहीं, then yes it is required. Yes yes, motorized vehicle whether it is your own or public vehicle, public transport, commercial vehicle, आपको e-way bill बनाना है. Sorry, पार्ट बी, पार्ट बी ना, पार्ट बी में व्हीकल का डिटेल आता है, कौन से व्हीकल से कहाँ मूव हुआ, हम लोग ही डाल सकते हैं. यस. वो आपके पिन कोड के बेसिस पे वो डिटरमाइन भी कर लेता है कितना किलोमीटर है, कितना डिस्टेंस है, कहाँ से कहाँ जा रहा है. एंड सर दे हैविंग द ओके लेट मी शेयर वन थिंग. सर दे हैविंग द रोबस्ट सिस्टम. आपका 1 साल पहले कौन सा डिलीवरी कहाँ से कहाँ गया था, कौन सा टोल क्रॉस किया था नहीं किया था, दे हैविंग द ऑल द डिटेल्स. ये डिपार्टमेंट उनके पास राइट से उनको मॉड्यूल दिया गया है. राइट, आप कोई भी आप डॉक्यूमेंट निकालो, दे कैन प्रूव कि ये मटेरियल यहाँ से यहाँ गया था या नहीं गया था. यस यस, आज को कोई भी देखना है तो इमीडिएटली दे कैन गो एंड वेरीफाई. हमें वो मॉड्यूल नहीं मिला सर, वो हमें नहीं दिया है. बेसिकली वो नेशनल हाईवे अथॉरिटी ने एक मॉड्यूल जो मेंटेन किया है ना जीपीएस के बेसिस पे, वो डिपार्टमेंट ऑफिसर को उनको उन्होंने एक्सेस दिया है. वी डोंट हैव दैट एक्सेस. सर कौन से रूट से गया, कौन सा टोल क्रॉस किया, कौन सा व्हीकल था, सर ड्राइवर कौन था, कौन सा व्हीकल था, वो भी याद कैसे रखोगे सर. प्रैक्टिकली इट इज डिफिकल्ट. ट्रांसपोर्टर्स आर फेसिंग द लॉट ऑफ म्यूजिक फॉर दिस. ट्रांसपोर्टर ने कहीं कहीं ये सब इश्यूज कर दिए हैं, जनरेट किया नहीं किया, और वो फिर अभी सी ट्रांसपोर्टर पे लाइबिलिटी नहीं है, लाइबिलिटी इज ऑन द सप्लायर, बट अल्टीमेटली दे आर टेकिंग द स्टेटमेंट्स ऑफ ट्रांसपोर्टर्स आल्सो. हाँ, वो नथिंग द स्टेक. यस, on the basis of their statement, the supplier and the customer, they are ending up with the paying the tax. Okay, that this was from my side. Now if any the question if it is remaining, definitely सर डालनी पड़ेगी ना सर. सर जीएसटी पेबल अंडर रिवर्स चार्ज आपको खड़ा करना है, वीजा वीज आपको आईटीसी ऑन रिवर्स चार्ज खड़ा करना है. तो एंट्री कौन से बेसिस पे पास करते हो, विदाउट डॉक्यूमेंट एंट्री पास कर देते हो. सर विदाउट डॉक्यूमेंट कौन सा एंट्री पास होता है. हाँ नो,
बेसिक वैल्यू की नहीं करनी है,
टैक्स की but that value should be reconciled with your that expense ledger. So this was from my side. Thank you very much. Yes sir. Yes, the reverse charge payable under reverse charge. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Timing are almost once. right? So I'll drop my number. Definitely, it is with her. Any of the question, if you have any point of time, I'll try to resolve it. I'm available on phone anytime.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Jayesh bhai, for this very elaborate and wonderful session and your detailed presentation on this. On behalf of the JB Nagar Study Circle, I would propose a hearty vote of thanks to CA Jayesh Thakkar. Also, a thank you note for all our coordinators for today who have helped us out in the meeting and all the members who came and attended and made it a wonderful session. Thank you.